Welcome to this session on English language learners screening, identification, placement, review, and exit criteria. This session is brought to you by the Capital District RBERN. The RBERNs, or Regional Bilingual Education Resource Networks, are funded through a contract with the New York State Education Department. The Capital District RBERN covers the area you see on the map in red and shares the areas in lavender and orange with sister RBERNs across the state. This session will address the guidance document regarding English language learners screening, identification, placement, review, and exit criteria. It will not, however, address the specific components for SIFE students or students with disabilities. Please see the session regarding those for that additional information. Before we begin, it's important that we all understand some of the key terms and acronyms that are referenced within the guidance document. SIFE stands for a student with interrupted or limited formal education. NYSITELL is the initial test for student identification and placement, and the NYSISLOT is the annual test of an English learner's performance. Qualified personnel will be addressed in more detail in the following slide. Qualified personnel are referenced throughout the document in numerous roles. A qualified person is a certified bilingual or English to speakers of other languages teacher who is fluent in the home language of the student and parent guardian, or who uses a qualified interpreter translator of the language or mode of communication the student and parent or guardian best understands. Or a qualified person may be another New York State certified teacher who has been trained in cultural responsiveness, language development, and the needs of ELLs, and who is proficient in the home language of the student or parent guardian, or who uses a qualified interpreter translator of the language or mode of communication the student or parent guardian best understands. The first step in the identification of an English learner occurs during the registration and enrollment process. Once the student has been officially registered and enrolled in the school, the HLQ, or Home Language Questionnaire, is provided to the parents. The HLQ is currently translated into Spanish, Chinese, Haitian Creole, Russian, Polish, Korean, Bengali, Arabic, Urdu, Vietnamese, Amharic, and Portuguese. Additional languages continue to be added. If you need assistance with low-incidence language translations, please reach out to your local RBERN. You may also use the link to the NYSED.gov website to access the translated versions. If the HLQ indicates that the home language is English or the student's primary language is English, then the student is not an ELL, and screening for ELL identification stops. If, however, the home language is indicated as other than English, or the student's primary language is other than English, an individual interview must take place. The individual interview must be conducted in English and the student's home language by qualified personnel. The interview, as well as all future oral and written communications, must be conducted with a qualified translator-interpreter provided by a school district. The interview should include a review of the student's abilities or work samples in reading and writing in English, reading and writing in the home language, and mathematics. These items are either collected or generated during the interview. They may be writing samples or exercises completed at the time of the interview. If the interview indicates that the home language is English or the student's primary language is English, then the student is not an ELL and screening for ELL identification stops. If the student has an IEP, this is the point where an additional step that we are not addressing today would occur. If the home language is other than English or the student's primary language is other than English, then the student may be an ELL, and you would proceed to the initial ELL identification assessment, the NYSITELL. The NYSITELL is used to determine a student's initial English proficiency level, which will then inform the amount and types of ENL services and scaffolds appropriate for the student. It must be administered by qualified personnel within 10 days of the student's initial enrollment in a New York State school. Since the identification process must begin no later than the date of the student's initial enrollment or reentry in a New York State school district, The NYSITELL must be administered within 10 days of that. However, the NYSITELL may not be administered before July 15th for students in grades 1 through 12 enrolling for the start of classes in September. For students enrolling in kindergarten for the start of classes in September, the NYSITELL may not be administered prior to June 1st. While the NYSITELL is typically administered only once, certain circumstances under reentry could indicate a need to retest the student. For example, if a current ELL leaves New York State and moves to another country, then returns to a New York State public school after 2 years, the district will follow the steps outlined in the initial identification process. If a current ELL leaves New York State and attends school in another U.S. state, then returns to a New York State public school after 2 years, the district will follow the steps outlined in the initial identification process. And if an ELL scores proficient on the NYSA slot, thereby testing out, and moves to another country, then returns to a New York State public school after 2 years, the district will follow the initial identification process, which may include re-identifying the student as an ELL. Once the identification process is completed and the student's language proficiency level is known, then the parents will receive a notification letter. If the student's language proficiency level is entering, emerging, transitioning, or expanding, then the student is an ELL and the parent or guardian will receive an entitlement letter. If the student scores commanding, they are not an ELL and the parents will receive a non-entitlement letter. The parent notification letter must be within 5 school days of the student's being identified as an ELL, and the parent guardian must receive that notice in the indicated preferred language. It must also include the following information: the ELL's English language proficiency level, the parent or guardian's right to seek a review of ELL identification or entitlement determination, and information regarding the mandatory parent orientation session. Upon receiving a written request from a parent or guardian, teacher, or student age 18 years or older within 45 school days of a student's initial ELL designation, a district has 10 school days to initiate a review of ELL identification determination. This review must be concluded within 10 school days or 20 school days if a CSE is consulted. It's important to note that the review of ELL identification determination does not allow ELLs to opt out of service. ELLs can currently exit ELL status in the following 3 ways. If a student is in grades K through 12, scoring at the commanding or proficient level on the NYSA slot. In grades 3 through 8, scoring at the expanding or advanced level on the NYSA slot, and a 3 or above on the New York State ELA assessment within the school year. Or in grades 9 through 12, scoring at the expanding advanced level on the NYSA slot and achieving a 65 or above on the English Regents exam in English within the same school year. This concludes our session. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us at RBERN.org.